Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled, What is the Big Idea with LSVT Big for Parkinson's? My name is Laura Gousset. I'm a physical therapist and the Chief Clinical Officer of LSVT Big for LSVT Global. And I'm joined today by Dr. Cynthia Fox, who is a speech-language pathologist and VP of Operations and also one of our co-founders from LSVT Global as well. Dr. Fox and I both are instructors for the LSVT Big training and certification course and will be instructors for the upcoming course coming to Birmingham, UK in March, what we'll talk about a little bit later in today's presentation. So we welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this overview that will give you some information on LSVT Big. Before we proceed further, we do want to acknowledge the funding support that has made the work of LSVT Big and LSVT Loud possible over the last several decades. And this funding support has made research on the treatment efficacy of these protocols possible. And we're very grateful for all of that work that has been done over the years. We also have a couple of disclosures that we'd like to share. Both Dr. Fox and I are employees of LSVT Global and have both financial and non-financial relationships with LSVT Global, including a treatment preference for the LSVT treatment techniques. In case you haven't joined one of our webinars today, we'll be going over a few logistics before we get to the heart of the content of this presentation. Towards the end of the webinar, we will be giving you some information on this upcoming training opportunity. If you are a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist, we have a LSVT Big training and certification course coming to Birmingham, UK in March 23rd and 24th of 2019. And that website where physios and OTs can register is listed here. At the end of the webinar, we'll be taking some time to address your questions. So in terms of logistics, right now, all of your microphones are on mute so that there's no background noise from the various environments from which you might be joining. However, at the end of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions out loud, and I'll go over those instructions towards the end of the webinar. At any time in the webinar, you can also type in your questions on your control panel, either in the chat box or in the questions box, and we'll stockpile those and answer as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. You can always email us as well at info@lsvtglobal.com at any time after the webinar for any type of information or questions that we can answer for you. Another thing that you might want to note is on your control panel, there is a handouts tab. If you open that up by clicking on that little arrow beside the word handouts, you should see two handouts. One is the webinar slides from today's handout. So if you wish to download those and print those for your own permanent reference, feel free to do so. There's also a brochure in there about the upcoming webinar, the upcoming training course in the UK. If you are a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist joining us from the United States, here's some basic information on how to self-report your continuing education activity. You can request a certificate from us by emailing us after the webinar at webinars@lsvtglobal.com, and we'll send you a certificate with your name, date, and duration of the webinar. You do have to attend the full webinar to be able to claim CEUs. And please check with your state, as licensing requirements for CEUs differ by state. So you want to see if they accept non-registered CEU activities. Briefly, here are biographies for your reference. Dr. Fox, as I said, has her doctorate degree in speech and hearing sciences from the University of Arizona in Tucson, and she has been integral to the research on LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. She is not only our co-founder, but an expert on rehabilitation and neuroplasticity and the role of exercise in Parkinson's disease. And she has been part of the LSVT teaching team for the last 20+ years. I myself am a physical therapist and have spent the majority of my career working with individuals with Parkinson's and other neurological disorders, and I've been part of the LSVT Big teachings team since 2011. So we're really grateful to have you join us today. Briefly, the objectives for today's presentation are these. We're going to be talking about the rationale for targeting amplitude across motor systems in Parkinson's disease. We'll talk a little bit about the mode of treatment delivery via motor learning and neuroplasticity principles. We'll review the key treatment techniques for LSVT Big. We'll highlight some of the research supporting LSVT Big. And then at the end, we'll address some FAQs and next steps for certification if you're a physio or an OT. So one question we have for you right now is we'd like to know who is joining us for our webinar. These webinars are global, and so if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute and typing in your chat box your country, where you're from, we'd love to share that with our audience and see how global our reach is for this current webinar. All right. We'll just give it a few minutes if you can find your little chat box there. And I see 3 from Belgium. That's great. Thank you. From England, another place in the UK, Germany, Scotland, a couple more from the UK, Ireland, another one from the UK. This is perfect. We're so excited to have you join us. Another one from Belgium, Ireland, Nashville, that's great. I'm close to you. I'm from Kentucky. And another one from UK. Perfect. Well, welcome to our webinar today. And just so you know as well, this webinar is being recorded. So if you have friends or colleagues you'd like to share this with, this webinar will be posted on our LSVT blog after the webinar for future viewing as well. Okay, so the question is Parkinson's disease a global pandemic, as it's been recently called in an article by Bass Bloom? And we know that currently there's up to 8 million people worldwide living with Parkinson's disease, which is an astounding number. But the prevalence of Parkinson's disease is actually expected to double by 2040, which is an even more astounding fact. And the question for all of us, whether we're a therapist or another medical professional or a person with Parkinson's, is are we ready to really help all the individuals with Parkinson's in this growing pandemic? Our mission as a company of LSVT Global is to really empower people with Parkinson's to restore and maintain their highest levels of communication, mobility, and independence with activities of daily living through our scientifically supported treatment protocols, LSVT Loud, which is a speech treatment, and LSVT Big, which is a physiotherapy and occupational therapy treatment, which we'll be talking about today. Our work is really unique because it's been based on over 25 years of research funded by the National Institutes of Health in the United States and vast clinical experience. We have over 25,000 therapists throughout the world in 73 countries who are currently certified to deliver LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. LSVT Loud is a speech therapy delivered by certified speech language pathologists, and LSVT Big is a physio and occupational therapy delivered by physiotherapists or occupational therapists who have been trained in this treatment protocol. So right now we're going to launch a little polling question to find out a bit more about you. And we want to know if you're a speech therapist, a physio or occupational therapist, a different kind of medical professional, a person with Parkinson's, or maybe someone else. And so if you just give me a moment, I'm going to launch a polling question. So don't answer this one in your question box or your control box, because I'm going to actually launch this poll, which you should see come up on your screen in just a minute. So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds or so to submit your response to who are you? And looks like everyone has responded, so thank you for being so speedy. And it looks like 82% of you are either a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist. And hold on just a second. I'm going to get back to my webinar here so I can share this with you. Okay. And so you can see 9% of you are speech therapists, 5% of you are a person with Parkinson's disease, and 5% of you are in that other category. So thank you for responding, and that helps us greatly to tailor our conversation today to you. Just one moment. Okay. So now you should be seeing my screen again. Okay, in this next slide, we want to start by showing you a video example of a woman who received the speech treatment called LSVT Loud. So you can see a before and after example of the treatment results that one can expect following this protocol. So the woman's name is Shirley, and she's 59 years old. At the time of the video, it only had been 2.5 years since diagnosis, but she was already having significant changes with her voice and her facial expression as well. She underwent the intensive 4-week protocol of LSVT Loud, and just so you know, nothing changed with her medications pre and post video. And so I'm going to go to the next slide and show you this video. It might take just a little bit to pull it up on your screen. So just give me a second here.
Have you noticed any changes in your speech or your voice that you would associate with Parkinson's?
Yes, I don't speak loud enough a lot of times.
Anything else?
Hoarse.
Uh-huh. Anything else?
I stutter, which I never did before.
Do this for me if you would. Take a deep breath and say ah for as long as you can. Good for you. Okay. Would you say Parkinson's disease has caused you to talk less?
Yes.
Because
I stutter and I can't be heard. If there's noise in the house, like when the kids come over, nobody pays attention to them because they can't hear me. Until I get mad and then yell.
Take a deep breath and say ah for as long as you can. Have you noticed changes in your speech or your voice as a result of the speech therapy?
Oh yes.
What have you noticed?
I talk louder. I think louder. I'm going to sing with the Son of the Sons of Pioneers one of these days. My
Good for you. That's excellent. Has anyone commented that it's easier to understand you now?
Oh yes, I set some of our friends back when we went to their house. I talked loud. Lou says, what the hell do you? My daughter said, oh, Ma, that's you?
What do you do when you want to be as easy to understand as possible?
Think loud.
Okay, and so let me get back to the main screen. Okay, and so you could see with Shirley that although the focus was on being louder, and that's really what she focused on as well, is being louder, that many things changed. Her facial expression changed, her affect changed. She appeared to be much happier than she was, or she was able to express those emotions inside much more than she was before. And so we call this a spread of effects that is common to both LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. We may focus on amplitude alone, but we expect that many things across the motor systems are going to improve as well as a result. Okay, so the next video I'm going to show you is a parallel example of LSVT Big, which is the physio and occupational therapy treatment. So similar in design of the protocol, because this one was based upon LSVT Loud. We're still focusing on amplitude, but now we're focusing on amplitude of movement. This pre-post video is of a gentleman named Bernie, who is a bit farther along in his Parkinson's disease course. He was 14 years post-diagnosis and was in the moderate stages of Parkinson's. So he was at a Hone and Yahr stage 3. The reason for the referral to physiotherapy was because of some increased difficulty with falls, balance, freezing, and walking that was affecting him in his daily life. As with Shirley, nothing changed with his medications over that 4-week of treatment, and he had also been optimized on his Parkinson's meds prior to starting LSVT Big. So this video is going to be a little bit different. There's no audio, and I apologize for the echoing in the last audio that you saw, or in the last video that you saw. You're going to see a split screen here with Bernie walking out of therapy on his first day of treatment on the left side of the screen and walking out of treatment on the last day on the right side of the screen. Okay, and it looks like my microphone was muted, so I apologize for that. You can see some of these changes here with Bernie. You can see that he's not using the cane anymore. You can also see that he's walking much faster. He's already passed his car, in fact, on the video on the right, following the last day of treatment. His stride length is longer. His arm swing is greater, more normal of what it should be for a gentleman of his age. Okay, and Bernie just keeps on walking there. So I'm going to go back to our main screen again. Okay, so hopefully you could see some of those changes in Bernie, but these are some of his more objective outcomes. You can see that he went from falling once or twice a month to not falling anymore post-treatment. You could clearly see that he went from using the cane to none. His confidence was measured by a scale called the Activities Specific Balance Confidence Scale, which he went from a 37.5 to 56.8% confidence. His gait velocity, I believe, is the most impressive. He went from about 30% of normal for his age to 100% of normal for his age, which enabled him to do functional things that were important to him, like go to the movies, play with his grandkids, go out to dinner with his friends and family. And so those were the really meaningful things that improved that numbers don't always tell, but we know is really the goal of therapy for our patients. So what are the fundamentals of LSVT Loud and LSVT Big, in case you're not familiar with them? Both of them are standardized, they're research-based, and this really makes it very unique and differentiates these protocols from many of the other things that we typically do as therapists that don't have a strong backing of evidence behind them, and they're specific protocols. These are the things that make them unique. First of all, we have a singular target of amplitude, whether it be for movement or voice. And treating amplitude is nothing really new in therapy and speech therapy or PT or OT. However, a singular focus on amplitude really is quite unique. The next thing that makes these unique is the mode of delivery is intensive and high effort. And in a few slides, we'll talk about some of the rationale behind that and what that intensivity looks like for each patient. And then for each patient, our goal is calibration. We recognize that as therapists, oftentimes we're quite successful at getting our patients to move bigger or talk louder within the treatment room, but it's difficult for us to get them to generalize and to carry over to everyday function outside of the treatment room. And a lot of the reasons of this are because of the common non-motor symptoms that you see in Parkinson's disease, whether it deals with sensory or kinesthetic awareness deficits, internal cueing deficits, or neuropsychological changes. And also in this presentation, we'll briefly address how we tackle those in the LSVT protocols. So whether a person receives LSVT Big or LSVT Loud, really our common rehabilitation goal is amplitude. And so it's a very cohesive and comprehensive way of treating patients with Parkinson's lifelong at evaluation through these intensive protocols and then through lifelong follow-up. And we have a very specific way of maintaining contact and helping people manage their Parkinson's disease symptoms no matter what stage and throughout the course of their life. We address these primary motor symptoms through our primary target of hypokinesia and bradykinesia. And if you're not familiar with those terms, it simply means movement that's too small and too slow compared to normal movement. Hypokinesia and bradykinesia are very specific to Parkinson's disease, and we find them even at diagnosis. The severity of them correlates with the amount of dopamine loss in the nervous system. It also correlates with disease progression and is generalized across the motor system. So we see hypophonia or a soft voice and hypokinesia, these small, slow movements. In LSVT Loud, we see that patients with Parkinson's have a loss of motor energy, and so it's underscaled. And what we do through treatment is drive amplitude to override that hypokinesia so that their voice doesn't come out in a shouting manner, but we rescale them to more normal amplitude. Likewise, in LSVT Big, oftentimes a person's movements, whether they be fine motor movements or gross motor movements, are too small, and our aim is to rescale them, scale them back up to normal posture, normal arm swing, normal stride length, for example. So amplitude training can also improve fine motor function. It's not just about getting a person walking better like Bernie, although certainly that's a very significant and important goal for many people. And this video is going to be showing you an example of how a therapist is working with a patient to drive that amplitude to improve a fine motor task of helping him to button and unbutton his shirts, which can be quite frustrating for some people. And so I'm going to play this video again, or this video for the first time, and hopefully you'll be able to see this really clearly with our friend named Bob.
Good, and I want you to just kind of notice as you're watching Bob do his buttons, it's a very slow, small kind of movement that he's using to try and get those buttons through the buttonhole.
Yes, we do struggle.
And this can be a very frustrating thing for a lot of people, Bob. You're not alone in that. Does the top button tend to be one of the hardest ones for you?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Good, you got it though. All right. that.
Well,
Let's do it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go again.
Wow.
Really push it in hard. Nice.
About a third of the time.
You're right. You're right. Good job. Now go back in and close it like you're angry with it. Really push it in strong. Nice. How fast was that?
Even quicker.
Even quicker. You're right.
I haven't done a button that quick and I don't know how long.
Good, good.
Okay, and so a nice quick video to really show you how amplitude can be used to really very quickly help someone improve a functional task. And so she didn't have to teach him really how to use a button hook, or she didn't give him a lot of verbal cues. It was just do it bigger. Now for Bob, it's important to know that to make this a lasting change, we would have to practice this really over and over and over again to help him to ingrain this in his brain, that this is the right amount of amplitude I need to use every time I button, so that I can button efficiently, get my shirt done quickly, just as I did before I had Parkinson's disease. So this mode of intensity and high effort, this is what it looks like. Our minimum dosage is treatment that's delivered 4 consecutive days a week for 4 weeks. And this is based on a significant amount of research that has been done on LSVT Loud and LSVT Big that has established that this efficacy is really critical to the outcomes that we see. Within the session, there's 60-minute individual treatment sessions, so it's not a group therapy session. The patient also has daily homework practice that takes them about 15 or 20 minutes a day, all 30 days of the month. We assign them daily carryover exercises all 30 days of the month. And those are really short tasks of helping them to use those bigger movements in everyday function outside of therapy. And all of this intensive practice helps a person with Parkinson's to really establish a lifelong habit of continuous practice, which will hopefully help them to slow their symptom progression and maintain their functional mobility over time. Within the session, we also drive a person to high effort through the exercises that we do. Now, you might be a little fearful of saying, well, how high is this intensity? And it's always scaled to a safe level for each individual. And so that's different for each individual depending on their disease stage and underlying comorbidities and such. And those are things that we discuss in the training and certification course. All right. So part of this intensity also is because it's well supported in the research on neuroplasticity and motor learning. If you read article after article, it really underscores the importance of intensive and repetitive practice to drive neuroplasticity, or those permanent changes, those physical changes in the brain, which we're really trying to achieve. We know that complex practice matters, and so as a therapist, we're always looking at what can we do to make this more challenging for the patient to drive that neuroplasticity. Salience matters. We know that a set of core exercises really isn't that meaningful to a patient. And so and briefly, we're going to be talking today about how important it is to link that to functional goals which are meaningful to that patient. And specificity matters as well. And in LSVT, we are targeting the specific deficit of hypokinesia in Parkinson's disease. Our goal is calibration, but we recognize that there is a mismatch between the internal perception of motor output in people with Parkinson's disease and how others perceive it. And so oftentimes when we get a person moving bigger or talking louder, it feels too loud or too big to them. And so because of that, the person becomes less likely to utilize those bigger, more normal movements in everyday life if they perceive that they're walking or moving in an exaggerated way. And so it takes a lot of repetition, a lot of feedback, a lot of reassurance and practice to help a person understand that, no, this really is normal movement that my therapist is teaching me, even though it might feel inside too big to me. So how do we address calibration? How do we achieve that? Well, really, it's about addressing these key non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And we know that Parkinson's is complex and that there are many non-motor symptoms. And there are some that actually aren't even listed on this slide because there's so many. The ones in blue are the ones that we specifically address with LSVT Big. So we know that there's a loss of higher cognitive functions such as slow thinking, difficulty sustaining attention, difficulty multitasking. We know there's sensory changes, and in LSVT Big we see this impaired perception of their movement or posture. And we know there's emotional changes that make exercising challenging. There can be anxiety. There can be just apathy about not being as motivated to do things as one used to be prior to Parkinson's. And so all of these non-motor and motor symptoms affect movement and motor learning in people with PD. So these are the three that I just briefly reviewed. Feedback in LSVT is really important, that it's personalized and meaningful and integral to calibration. And so very often throughout the treatment, we're having statements such as, yes, that's the same amount of effort you need to use when you lift your legs into the car today when you leave. Or be sure to have your 9 effort when you're turning over in bed tonight. So the person really begins to understand this is how it needs to feel in order for me to move normally in whatever I'm doing in everyday life. A snapshot of the LSVT Big treatment session looks like this. On the left side, you'll see these maximal daily exercises. And these are the core exercises that we do with large amplitude. So they're multi-directional, every direction, forward, sideways, backwards, rotational activities. They're very challenging for the patient in terms of balance, increasing aerobic capacity, but really the core focus is on be bigger, not just in your arm and leg movements, but all the way down to your finger movements. In every session, we have walking big, and as long as the person is ambulatory, whether they can walk for 5 steps or 5,000 steps, we're going to work on normalizing the amplitude of movement in that person with regards to posture, stride length, arm swing, etc. Within this, we might also address freezing issues that are very specific to that patient. On the right side of the screen, you see functional component tasks in a hierarchy exercises, and these are really the heart of LSVT treatment when we are taking those same big movements that the person learned in the maximal daily exercises and now applying it to functional goals that are relevant and meaningful to that person. So it could be things like getting up out of their easy chair, out of the car, pulling keys out of their pocket, using the cell phone. It could be things that are recreational, like a person wanting to be able to return to golfing, or it could be things that are very functional, like being able to get in and out of bed by themselves or dress by themselves. So those things are very much individualized to every person. Every patient also has homework exercises, which includes all of the daily exercises, their functional component tasks, and big walking, which are assigned all 30 days of the month. So again, think of the LSVT exercises as your core amplitude rescaling exercises, and the functional component tasks and hierarchy as then translation of amplitude to those functional, salient, and individualized goals. These are just some photograph snapshots of the LSVT Big exercises, and again, you can't really see the dynamic nature on a still photo like this, but you can see the different directions and planes of movement that the therapist is demonstrating here. Now you might see that 5 of the 7 exercises are done in standing, but it's important to know that these are also personalized for each individual. So when you have patients that come in with PD or another diagnoses that really aren't able to stand safely even without support, we'll teach you in the training course how to adapt them to a sitting position or even a lying down position when needed. And we have exercise programs and tools that are really adapted to all levels of ability. That functional application could include many things. It could be gardening, putting on socks, buttoning, getting out of a chair, walking. I mean, really, you name it. If it includes movement of the body, it can be addressed through LSVT Big. Our goal is generalization to functional activities. And so your patient might be learning the rock and reach exercise. And while she's doing it, we might be saying to her, that's fantastic. That big arm swing and that big stride length you're using, that's the same type of feeling and the same size of arm swing and stride length you need to be using when you're walking your dog. So the patient really gets it, that there is a functional purpose for why I'm doing these exercises. And that link to function and task-specific practice is really vital for generalization. So we should never assume as therapists that we teach them large amplitude exercises and they're automatically going to be generalizing to everyday function. And in fact, through experience clinically, you know that that often doesn't happen, that patients need task-specific practice, whether it be getting out of the car, cooking a meal, buttoning, you know, maneuvering through the restaurant. Maybe it's related to their workplace or taking care of their family, or maybe it's a recreational activity. So this next video is an example of a gentleman whose goal was to be able to get in and out of his bed more efficiently. And so this is a quick pre-post video that you'll see of the changes in that functional goal that he had.
You're ready.
Ready?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, the immersion?
Yeah, the immersion.
When are you going to do it? In April? Yeah. You might have to probably.
Okay. Is that pretty good?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, now go ahead and get out of bed.
You can practice that. Yeah, then I'll see it when immersion was great. You know.
Go ahead.
Ready?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, and so you can see with this gentleman just how much more efficient his movement was after 4 weeks of intensive treatment. And actually his therapist also practiced maneuvering under the covers and heavy blankets as well as part of that, not shown on the video. But certainly really meaningful to this man. Now he's the one that came up with this big arm movement to help him with that momentum of getting in out of bed. Interestingly, his therapist didn't teach him for that, but since it worked so well for him, he continued to do that on his own. So LSVT Big is an intensive treatment protocol where the patient is seen 4 times a week for 4 weeks. And what you'll see after you begin to deliver this treatment to your patients is that they make incredible gains over that intensive 1 month of treatment. However, the exercises need to continue. And we really emphasize to the patient that just as you take your daily dose of medicine for your Parkinson's symptoms, it's just as important to take that daily dose of your LSVT Big homework exercises to maintain your function over time as well. And that combination of optimal medical management and optimal exercise and physio and occupational therapy management is really the best combination for success for your patients with Parkinson's disease. So how do we support people lifelong after they go through the LSVT programs? One of them is to help them with their daily exercise. And we do this a couple of different ways. We do have videos that they can download or stream, or they can purchase a DVD of the LSVT Big exercises to help them with their daily practice lifelong. And for LSVT Loud, we have an FDA-approved medical device. It's a software program called the LSVT Companion, which they can use to help them do their daily exercises in a very personalized way at home every day. And that data can be collected and provided back to the therapist. We also have new group exercise options. So after individuals have completed the LSVT training and treatment programs, they can continue on with group exercise programs called Big for Life and Loud for Life. And after you're certified in LSVT Big, you'll be eligible to enroll in a very short 3-hour online training course so that if you're interested, you can lead a Big for Life class in your community as well. After that, we encourage patients to come back for a regular tune-up every 3 to 12 months. So in this tune-up, it's much like a checkup where we would reevaluate them, see if anything has changed, and if it has, we'll give them a little extra motivation and also provide them with a short duration of therapy visits to really help them to rescale their amplitude again to where it should be and to restore any changes in their outcome measures that we're seeing. Some patients, we see them back every 6 months or so and everything really looks stable, and we really don't need to do any additional visits, and other patients need a few visits to help them maintain those gains. And then lastly, we really encourage patients to find other types of enjoyable fitness, whether it be Nordic walking or Tai Chi or really whatever it is. And as a therapist, we can advise our patients on various exercise options that might be good for them and available in the community as well. All right, and next let's look a little bit on the research on LSVT Big. The main RCT that was done on LSVT Big came out of Berlin, Germany, and thus we call it the Berlin LSVT Big study. It was published in Movement Disorders in 2010. And in this study, 60 patients were randomized into 3 groups. 20 did LSVT Big, 20 did Nordic walking, and 20 did a home exercise program that was unsupervised, but specific to their Parkinson's disease. The LSVT Big group was seen for 16 sessions, 4 times a week for 4 weeks. The Nordic walking group was seen also for 16 sessions, but twice a week for 8 weeks. And the main outcome variable that was measured was the UPDRS motor score, and a decrease in this number signifies an improvement in that motor score. And so you can see the dashed line on the bottom is the LSVT Big group, and this was the only one that had an improvement. The amount of change in the change between groups was statistically significant, whereas you can see the Nordic walking group and the home exercise program group did not improve, and in fact declined a little bit over the 16 weeks that was the length of the treatment study. Other studies have been done over the years that have shown us improvements in trunk rotation, stride length, speed of walking and reaching, improved reaction time, improved balance, coordination, abilities with activities of daily living, and one of our more recent studies was improved ability to dual task. In a more recent study also, which was a retrospective chart review done by researchers at Louisiana State University in the United States, they looked at improvements in the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. This was more looking at occupational measures rather than mobility measures. And so the top areas of concern noted by the patients that were treated were handwriting, walking, balance, lower extremity dressing, buttoning, and transfers. And through this chart review, they noticed significant changes in their perceived performance and fine motor skills in those patient charts. And 72 to 75% of the occupational performance priorities fell into the self-care category. If you're interested, all of our data is summarized in this study as well, and if you want us to email it to you, we can certainly do that as well. You can always email us at info@lsvtglobal.com. So we want to end with some frequently asked questions before we get to your questions. Is LSVT used with other conditions beyond Parkinson's disease? Yes, and especially in LSVT Loud, we've had single subject case study and small group designs on these diagnoses listed here. In LSVT Big, we have also treated many patients over the years with atypical Parkinsonisms, such as PSP, multisystem atrophy, Lewy body dementia, and we've had some looking at multiple sclerosis and stroke as well. Our published data so far includes case studies for stroke, and we expect this to continue to grow over time. As part of the training course, we will teach our therapists how to assess whether someone might be a good responder for LSVT Big if they have a diagnosis other than idiopathic Parkinson's disease. You might wonder, are these programs really feasible in the real world because of their intensive nature? And what we found is that yes, that there is significant potential for change and restoration of function in that short but intensive treatment. And that helps to establish the medical necessity for therapy in Parkinson's disease. And we have real world experience with thousands of patients who have improved greatly as a result of these protocols. We've also found that the patients are really so motivated and love to see the improvements that they've gained over a short duration of time. And because of that, our patients tend to have a very high rate of attendance and participation because these treatments tend to be so empowering for them. We've also used LSVT Big in different treatment settings, commonly outpatient, but also could be used in home health, skilled nursing facilities or nursing homes, private practice, really wherever patients are seen, LSVT Big can be delivered. And as part of the training certification course, we'll also teach therapists how this treatment can be bridged across practice settings. So for example, sometimes patients start in a hospital or start in a home health setting, but then progress and move and complete the protocol in an outpatient or private practice setting. A little bit of information on the training and certification course coming to Birmingham, UK. We would be delighted if you would attend and tell your colleagues about it as well. As I stated before, it'll be March 23rd and 24th, 2019 at the Studio Birmingham. It's being sponsored by a CE organization called Course Beetle. And so the website is coursebeetle.co.uk, and you'll find it in their website. As I said, it's for physiotherapists and occupational therapists, really in any practice setting in the UK. It'll be in English, but you can attend if you're really from any country as long as you understand English. If you are a person with Parkinson's, there will be a two-hour free informational seminar on March 24th from noon to 2. And in that seminar, we'll have a 1-hour lecture, similar to list the ones, so that you'll learn more about LSVT Big. So if you're in the UK and know persons with Parkinson's, please encourage them to come to this free seminar. The second hour of that, from 1 to 2, people with Parkinson's will be invited to stay and participate in exercises with the therapists who are attending the LSVT certification course. The registration fee is shown here, and also I have attached the brochure and the webinar handouts in your control panel today if you'd like to download that. If you can't make it to one of our live training courses, you can also get certified online. So it's the same instruction, the same CEUs and certification as the live course. It's self-paced with 90 days to review that course and take the course. It takes about 16 hours altogether to go through the online course. We'll still ship you the same materials as you would receive in the live course, and the fee for that is $580 US. You can learn about all of our live courses and the online course on our website, lsvtglobal.com. What comes with certification is a number of things. You'll be listed on our clinician directory for referrals. You'll be provided with marketing tools and resources. All of the treatment resources you need for treatment and assessment will be downloadable and available to you through your private clinician account. You'll have access to monthly live and on-demand webinars on advanced topics for no additional charge. You'll have direct access to our faculty both during and after certification, whether you take it live or online. We'll provide you with an LSVT Big Homework Helper DVD, a printed course binder, and if you take the online course, you'll have access to that course for the whole 90 days. And then you'll have exclusive access to the advanced courses after you're certified, such as Big for Life as one. So if you're looking for how do you locate certified clinicians now, you can go to our website and click on Find a Clinician. Click on LSVT Big if you're looking for that type. Enter your location, such as your city and country, and your search radius, and then search. Currently, there's about 64 LSVT Big physiotherapists and occupational therapists in the UK, but we could sure use a lot more because of the number of patients with PD in the UK, and so we really do hope that you'll join us. So to summarize, the LSVT protocols address fundamental symptoms of patients with Parkinson's that they experience, like hypokinesia and sensory deficits. The mode of delivery is consistent with the principles that are well known of motor learning and neuroplasticity. It is a standardized protocol, but it's very much personalized and adapted across disease severity and patient needs. We have short-term data supporting improvements in the UPDRS and other measures of motor functioning, and we offer training and certification for LSVT Big and ongoing support for therapists and people with Parkinson's as well. So that was a quick summary, but I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions from you. And so here are some basic instructions about how to ask your questions right now. One is you can type your question in the control panel, and as soon as you submit that, I'll read it. It'll be anonymous, and I'll provide the answer to everyone. The second way is that you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon. Once you do that, I'll find out who has raised their hand. I will call out your name so that you know that it's your turn. Please make sure that if you do that, that your microphone is unmuted as well, so that we can hear you, and then you can ask your question out loud. And as I said before, anytime you want, you can email us at info@lsvtglobal.com if you think of any questions later. So with that, I'm going to check on some hands here. It looks like we might have a couple of hands that are raised, so just give me a moment. Okay, and I think whoever raised their hand maybe just took it down. So if you didn't mean to, go ahead and raise your hand again. Okay, and okay. So here is a question. Thank you. Is there a difference in effect of the treatment for different stages of the Hoehn-Yahr? Great question. Thank you for asking that. There was one study that was done but not published that looked at the efficacy of LSVT Big and did indeed find that in the earlier stages, the treatment efficacy, the effect size, I should say, was greater in the earlier stages of 1 and 2 on the Hoehn-Yahr scale. However, what I'll tell you is that the patients that had more advanced Parkinson's disease, stages 3 through 5, still made improvements as judged by the Hoehn-Yahr, as judged by the outcome measures. And so, although it's not maybe as great on a functional standpoint, still really significant for that person that received treatment, and would be a great question to continue to research over time. Let me just check and see if there's any other questions that came in here. Thank you all for your questions. And I think there might be one more hand raised here. Okay, Nicola King, I'm going to unmute your microphone. And it looks like you might be self-muted. If you could check your own microphone. I'll give you a minute here. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so it looks like there's no other questions rolling in, and we're close to the top of our hour. And so again, if you think of questions later, please do email us. There's going to be a survey that pops up after you exit your webinar today, and we'd appreciate your responses on those surveys as we look at each and every one of those. This webinar will be recorded, and you'll be able to find it on our website under the on-demand webinars on our blog, along with many other different webinars that have been previously recorded and available to you publicly for no additional cost. Maybe, I think there may be one more question here before we log off. And Cynthia, if you are on, the question is LSVT used much in the NHS?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I apologize for not talking more, but I've got a bad cough and not a good voice, but I can handle this. So LSVT Loud has a long history in the NHS. We've been training there for over 10 years. It was included in the NICE guidelines, and we see clinicians using it in many different places. Now, my understanding is that trusts vary from locations, so it's not sort of a flat, if it works here, it will work there. But certainly, there are pockets of clinicians who've been extremely successful in implementing LSVT Loud, which is the same dosage and protocol in terms of how frequently we see patients, et cetera, in the NHS. With LSVT Big, it's newer, so we don't have as many certified clinicians, and I think we're still figuring out the best way. Certainly in other countries, the US included, as well as when we've moved into France and Germany, where LSVT Loud started, we've been able to leverage, in some cases, opening up LSVT Big for funding, using the research base there, as well as the expanding research base for LSVT Big proper. So when we do our training courses, we certainly like to work with local teams, figure out what your specific challenges might be, and how we can help sort of open that door and that opportunity for LSVT Big, in this case, to be part of the NHS system.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cynthia, and hopefully that gave you a little bit of information. So again, we thank you so much for attending this webinar today. And again, if we can help you at all or you're seeking more information, please visit our website or email us at any time. And I hope you have an enjoyable remainder of your day.